Something shifts the moment a woman realizes you've lost interest. It's not just an emotional response, it's a psychological reaction that reveals her true feelings in ways she might not even understand herself. And if you know how to handle it, you hold all the power. Women are highly attuned to energy shifts in relationships. When they sense a change, when the attention they were used to suddenly fades, it triggers an emotional and subconscious response. This is where most men make mistakes. They either rush back in to reassure her, proving that she still has control, or they pull away out of frustration, believing that if she's not chasing, she doesn't care. But a Stoic man does neither. A Stoic man observes, remains composed, and allows her mind to do the work. He doesn't react emotionally, he doesn't explain himself, he doesn't seek validation. Instead, he understands that her reaction to his detachment is a reflection of her own internal state, not something he needs to fix. Today, I'll reveal the 7 psychological reactions women have when they realize you've lost interest, and more importantly, how a Stoic man responds to each of them. Once you recognize these patterns, you'll see the hidden power dynamics in every interaction. You'll understand why women behave the way they do when you pull back and how to position yourself as the kind of man they respect, desire, and chase. Pay close attention, because most men never understand this psychological shift, and that's exactly why they lose control in relationships without even realizing it. Let's get into it. 1. The shock of losing control. When a woman realizes that you've lost interest, her initial reaction is shock, but not the kind you might think. It's not just surprise, it's a sudden disruption of the certainty she once had about your role in her life. Up until now, she may have felt secure in her influence over you, believing she had your attention whenever she wanted it. But when that certainty disappears, it triggers a powerful emotional response. Women, by nature, seek emotional security in relationships. They may not always show it, but they find comfort in knowing where they stand with a man, whether they're interested in him or not. The moment she senses that your energy has shifted, that comfort is ripped away, leaving her feeling uneasy. Suddenly, questions start running through her mind. What changed? Did I misread him? Why isn't he acting the same? This is where most men make their first mistake. They panic. They feel the shift in her energy and try to reassure her, explain themselves, or seek validation by proving they're still interested. But a Stoic man does the exact opposite. A Stoic man understands that silence creates power. He doesn't fill the gap with explanations. Instead, he allows her own thoughts to do the work. By not reacting emotionally, he amplifies the uncertainty in her mind, making her more focused on his absence than she ever was on his presence. The key here is to do nothing. Let the shock settle in. Let her feel the shift. A woman values what she fears losing. When you pull away and remain composed, she begins to reevaluate you and your role in her life, without you having to lift a finger. 2. The need to reclaim validation. After the initial shock settles in, a woman's next instinct is to reclaim her sense of validation. She may not even realize it consciously, but when a man who was once attentive suddenly withdraws, it creates a void, and human nature hates voids. Validation is like oxygen in relationships. When a woman feels your attention slipping away, it triggers an internal discomfort that she must resolve. But this isn't just about feelings, it's about regaining a sense of control. She was used to knowing where she stood with you, and now, uncertainty has taken over. This is when she starts testing the waters to see if she can still influence your emotions. You may notice her reaching out more, sending casual texts, or finding excuses to interact. Messages like, "Hey, how have you been?" or "I saw something that reminded me of you," aren't random. They are calculated moves to see if she still holds significance in your life. If she doesn't get the response she's hoping for, she might escalate her attempts. Some women become distant on purpose, pretending they don't care, hoping to provoke a reaction from you. Others may try to spark jealousy by mentioning other men or emphasizing how busy and happy they are without you. Here's where most men fail. They mistake these attempts as genuine interest and immediately fall back into old patterns of chasing, over-explaining, or trying to fix things. But a Stoic man holds his ground. He doesn't fall for these emotional tests. Instead of reacting, he simply continues living his life, unaffected. The less you react, the more she has to work to understand you. And the harder she works to figure you out, the more she becomes emotionally invested, often without even realizing it. 3. Subtle manipulation attempts. When a woman realizes that direct attempts to regain validation aren't working, she often shifts to subtle manipulation tactics. These are designed to provoke an emotional reaction from you, whether it's jealousy, frustration, or a need to win her back. One of the most common tactics is acting indifferent. She may start posting on social media more frequently, emphasizing how happy she is, or making sure you see that she's moved on effortlessly. This isn't always a conscious game. It's her way of reclaiming control over the situation by showing that she's unaffected. Another strategy is mentioning other men, not necessarily because she's genuinely interested in them, but because she wants to see how you react. If you've ever had a woman casually bring up how much fun she had with someone else or how other guys have been giving her attention, understand that this is rarely an accident. The worst mistake a man can make at this stage is taking the bait. When men react emotionally, whether by getting defensive, acting jealous, or trying to prove their worth, it confirms to her that she still holds power over them. She may not even want another man, but if your reaction shows that it affects you, she gets what she wanted, proof that you still care. A Stoic man, however, remains completely unfazed. He doesn't acknowledge the attempts, nor does he change his behavior. He knows that if a woman truly moves on, she wouldn't feel the need to prove it. By staying indifferent to her manipulation, you communicate the ultimate message: you are in control of yourself, and nothing she does will dictate your emotional state. And that, paradoxically, makes her even more drawn to you. 4. Curiosity and overthinking. When a woman realizes that her usual strategies, seeking validation, testing your reactions, or attempting subtle manipulation, aren't working, she enters a new phase of psychological tension, curiosity and overthinking. At this point, your detachment is no longer something she can ignore. Instead of simply reacting to the situation, she starts to analyze it. She replays past interactions, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when the shift happened. Did I miss something? Was there a sign I overlooked? These questions don't just appear occasionally, they become a loop in her mind, keeping you at the center of her thoughts. Women are naturally more emotionally introspective than men, which means that when something doesn't make sense to them, they feel a deep need to find closure or an explanation. But in this case, the explanation isn't readily available, because you're not giving it to her. This is where most men fail. They sense that she's thinking about them again and rush to reconnect, believing that she must be coming back. But a Stoic man understands the power of silence. He lets her curiosity build. He lets the uncertainty grow. And here's the key: curiosity creates emotional investment. The more she thinks about you, the more you occupy space in her mind. And the more space you take up in her thoughts, the stronger her emotions become. Instead of reacting, a Stoic man remains patient and observant. He knows that if she truly values him, she will reach out on her own. And when she does, it will be because she genuinely wants to reconnect, not just to satisfy her curiosity, but because she realizes she doesn't want to lose him. 5. Ego resistance and emotional conflict. As a woman's curiosity deepens and she begins to overthink your detachment, her ego starts to fight back. This is where an internal battle begins, one between her emotions and her pride. At this stage, she might try to convince herself that she doesn't care, telling herself things like, "He was never that important anyway," or, "If he doesn't want me, I don't want him either." She may even adopt a mindset of indifference, acting as if nothing has changed. But here's the truth: if she truly didn't care, she wouldn't need to convince herself of anything. The very fact that she's having these thoughts means she's emotionally invested, but her ego is trying to protect her from the discomfort of rejection. This internal conflict often leads to erratic behavior. One day, she might act completely detached, as if your absence has no impact on her. The next, she might test the waters in subtle ways, liking one of your posts, mentioning you in passing to mutual friends, or even sending a casual message just to see if you respond. This isn't necessarily an attempt to reconnect on a deeper level, it's her ego trying to confirm that she still holds power over you. Most men fall into one of two traps. Some assume that her cold behavior means she has truly moved on, so they give up entirely. Others take the bait at the first sign of her re-engagement and immediately start giving her back the validation she lost. But a Stoic man does neither. He understands that this resistance is temporary and that emotions, over time, always win the battle against pride. Instead of reacting, he remains unmoved, knowing that her internal struggle will only grow stronger. Eventually, as the resistance fades, her real emotions will surface. And when that happens, it won't be about ego or control, it will be a genuine realization that she might have misjudged the situation, and more importantly, misjudged you. 6. The emotional void sets in. As time passes and her attempts to regain validation fail, something deeper begins to take hold. She starts to feel the void you left behind. At first, she may have believed that she could simply move on without a second thought, but the absence of your presence begins to weigh on her in ways she didn't expect. This void isn't just about missing you, it's about the realization that something significant has shifted. The attention, the consistency, the emotional presence she once took for granted is no longer there. And whether she admits it or not, she starts to notice the difference. This is when she begins comparing. She might look at other men and realize they don't bring the same energy you did. Conversations feel emptier. The dynamic with other people lacks the unspoken connection she felt with you. At this stage, the power dynamic has completely reversed. In the beginning, she may have believed that she was in control, that your presence was guaranteed. But now, with each passing day, she realizes that this assumption was wrong. And the less she hears from you, the more your absence becomes amplified in her mind. Many men, sensing this shift, make the mistake of reaching out, hoping to capitalize on the moment. But a Stoic man understands that silence is far more powerful than words. Instead of rushing in, he allows her to fully experience the weight of that void. He knows that emotions need time to grow, that longing is created in absence, not presence. And so he does nothing. He lets her sit with her thoughts, with the emptiness of the situation, until she is forced to confront what she never expected, that losing him was never part of her plan. 7. The breaking point, she acts or moves on. There comes a moment when the emotional tension reaches its peak. She has gone through shock, the need to reclaim validation, subtle manipulation attempts, overthinking, ego resistance, and finally, the emotional void. Now, she faces a decision. She either takes action or convinces herself to move on. If the emotional impact has been strong enough, she won't be able to let it go. The silence, the absence, and the uncertainty will push her to act. She may reach out in a subtle way, testing the waters with a casual message or an indirect attempt to reconnect. If she feels more urgency, she might drop all pretense and try to re-establish a connection more directly. But what matters most isn't what she does, it's how you respond. Most men, at this stage, make a critical mistake. The moment she reaches out, they immediately give her back the validation she lost, undoing all the work that led to this point. They act as if nothing happened, eager to reconnect, unknowingly reinforcing her previous power over the dynamic. A Stoic man, however, does not simply accept her return at face value. He does not assume that just because she reaches out, she's truly ready to engage with him on his terms. Instead, he remains composed, detached, and indifferent. On the other hand, if she chooses to move on, a weak man will see it as a loss. He'll feel the need to chase, to prove his worth, to win her back. But a Stoic man knows that letting go is also a form of power. If she walks away for good, he doesn't see it as rejection, he sees it as a natural conclusion to a situation where he never compromised his value. Regardless of her choice, he remains unaffected. Because in the end, it was never about her, it was always about his own self-respect. By now, you've seen the 7 psychological reactions women have when they realize you've lost interest. Each stage follows a predictable pattern: shock, validation seeking, subtle manipulation, overthinking, ego resistance, the emotional void, and finally, the breaking point. But what separates ordinary men from those who command respect and attraction is how they respond to these shifts. Most men make one of 2 mistakes. Some chase the moment they sense a woman pulling away, desperately trying to regain what they feel is slipping away. Others react emotionally, allowing frustration or ego to dictate their actions, pushing her even further. But a Stoic man does neither. He understands the nature of attraction. He doesn't chase, he doesn't react, he simply exists in a state of complete self-sufficiency. This is the core difference between those who are in control of their emotions and those who are controlled by them. A woman's reaction to your detachment is not your responsibility. It is a reflection of her own internal struggles, her perception of loss, and her need to restore certainty. Your job is not to reassure her, nor is it to manipulate her. It is simply to remain unmoved, unaffected, and in control of your own reality. The question isn't whether she will react, the question is how much control you have over yourself when she does. In the end, True strength comes from mastering your own emotions, not seeking to influence hers. The man who understands this doesn't just attract women, he commands their respect. If this video gave you value, hit the like button and subscribe for more insights like this. And let me know in the comments, have you ever noticed a woman reacting differently when you pulled away? Type Stoic control if you're ready to embrace emotional mastery and take control of your relationships.